because we live in a world that's rife with prejudice. And in my life, as you saw in that film, I lived through two different kinds of prejudice. When I was 5 years old, my own country, the United States of America, categorized me as an enemy alien and a threat to national security. 5 years old. On December 7, 1941, Pearl Harbor was bombed by Japan, and this world was swept up by war hysteria and racism. And we Americans of Japanese ancestry looked exactly like the people that bombed Pearl Harbor. And overnight, people looked at us with suspicion and fear and outright hatred, simply because we looked like the bombers of Pearl Harbor. Even the President of the United States was swept up and stampeded by that. On February 19, 1942, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, which ordered all Japanese Americans on the West Coast, approximately 120,000 of us, to be summarily rounded up. And I remember that day that soldiers carrying rifles with bayonets on them came to our front door, banged on the door, and forcibly ordered us out of our home. We were shipped 2/3 of the way across the country to the swamps of Arkansas. They called it a relocation center. It was really an American concentration camp. I remember the barbed wire fences that confined us. I remember the tall sentry tower with the machine guns pointed down at us. I remember searchlights that followed me when I made the night runs from our barrack to the latrine. But to 5-year-old me, I thought it was nice that they lit the way for me to be an innocent child. But for my parents, it was a degrading, painful, anguishing experience. They lost everything that they had built up to that point in life. My father's business was taken, their bank account was taken, our home was taken, everything was taken. But when the war ended, the gates of the camp were thrown open, and we were free. As suddenly as the soldiers marching up to our home and ordering us out. It was a totally irrational act of hysteria and racial prejudice. I went through that experience. But there was another experience of prejudice. And there were barbed wire fences that I couldn't see. When we were released, and a few years after that, I was in middle school. I had a growing realization that I was different in ways other than my Japanese face. My buddies at school, as you heard there, would say, "Sally's cute." I thought Sally was all right. But then there was a girl named Monica who was prematurely blossoming out in full womanhood. And they'd say, "Oh wow, Monica's hot." I thought both Monica and Sally were nice. But Bobby, he was so But I noticed the other boys didn't think like that. I had been punished for being different once, severely, for 4 years of my life. And I didn't want to be different. And so I acted like the rest of the boys. When they started dating, I dated girls. When my buddy wanted to double date, I double dated. But to tell the truth, I was more interested in my buddy than in my date. It was a very uncomfortable way of living. But as I grew older, I realized that I wasn't the only one. I met other people who felt like me. And we would get together in bars that you entered through the alleyway. Very dimly lit lights, usually red, in the alley. I felt imprisoned in another kind of concentration camp, simply because we were different. But I found my comfort and love with my parents. They loved us, they loved me, just like they loved my brother or my sister. My brother loved baseball. My father loved baseball when he was a young man. He played baseball with his baseball team. This is before the war, around the San Francisco Bay area. And he took both my brother and me to baseball games. I found it so boring. Grown adults throwing balls, hitting them with sticks, running around. There were so many other things I would rather be doing, like going to the movies or on the radio, listening to pop music. But I went there, and my father took us to movies as well. They treated us equally, and they loved us equally. That was very clear. My brother got married. He asked me to be his best man. But I had friends that were not bridegroom candidates. I mean, bride candidates. I had friends, and some were best friends. But before I was able to come out to my father, he passed. Much later, I had a best friend that I really loved, and we wanted to live together. And so I came out to my mother, and it was a shock to her at first. She thought Brad was a best friend, but now it was a different picture. And she said she was disappointed that she couldn't have grandchildren from me. But she knew who Brad was before I came out to her. And ultimately she embraced him like her own son. And that moment came when Brad would, I was off in the studio, so Brad would drive her around to the grocery store or wherever. And Brad said that he knew that she had accepted him when she asked him, "How much did you pay for this car?" She wanted to know how much I paid for everything. She was polite and with Brad. She never asked that question, but she accepted him as her son, and she treated him as her son. But life goes on, and my mother got ill. It was a horrible illness called Alzheimer's. And she couldn't live by herself anymore. And I wanted to take her in. And I asked Brad, "Will you accept my mother in our home?" And Brad said yes. And for 4 years of the last 4 years of her life, we took care of her. And Brad became more of a son to her than my brother. It was love, parental love, that made us possible to be who we are. And so the name PFLAG, Parents and Friends of Gays and Lesbians, is so profoundly meaningful to me. And the fact that those parents are organized and working together in concert to break this invisible barbed wire fence that so many people are still living in prison behind is one that moves me very much. And there you are, all gathered together, working together in concert to make this a better and more equal world for your children and your friends and your family. So thank you very much for that. Thank you for this Betty DeGeneres Award. That name is going to be very important for me as well. I met her at a television studio green room. We were both waiting to be interviewed, and I found her to be a charming, delightful lady who had very strong ideas about how the world should be, just like my mother. She was a tough lady too, and Brad found out about that part of her as well. The Betty DeGeneres Award from the parents and friends of lesbians and gays. I will treasure this. Thank you all.